Digital visualization technology reinterpreted through Chinese aesthetics. Introduction. This practice-led research project includes the creation of video art. Digital visualization technology is used to recreate Chinese traditional landscape art within the new genre of the video painting. The paper describes findings from the practice-based research process, defines how temporality, space and multi-perspective is used in traditional Chinese art, and relates this to modern digital computer animation and 3D visualization practice. In his book The Detour Over China, the French philosopher François Jullien attempts to create a new approach to Western culture, a local change of thinking, a process of distancing from Western thinking as an effective strategy, where Chinese philosophy functions as an outside from which to see more clearly the values and preoccupation of Western culture. The video painting Shan Xiao is an individual artistic response. In the sense of François Jullien, it is a detour over China, emphasizing to some extent pictorial concepts and practical aspects of the Chinese painting process enables to distance and to take a fresh approach to Western digital visualization practice. The paper is a reflection on our current digital visualization practice and highlights how its technical, aesthetic and expressive conditions are the result of a long continuative cultural, technological and intellectual development within the Western civilization, which allows certain ways of visual expression but also puts restraints on other. First, we have a look at Western principles. The intended purpose and motivation of science and technological progress in our Western civilization is mainly directed by achieving perfection in measuring and rendering the objective and accountable truth of our world. The creation and simulation of real or hyperreal space is one of the main objectives in photography, film, digital animation, and 3D visualization practice. Based on the Renaissance tradition, achieving the effect of realistic space by the employment of linear perspective is a major preoccupation of Western visual culture. In the construction of a virtual 3D space, the Cartesian grid is used to reconstruct this geometrical perspective. Of course, there have been other attempts in Western culture like Cubism, but the main paradigm remains geometrical perspective. Now we have a look at Eastern principles. These are multiple and shifting perspective. In Chinese culture, the landscape painting is not a representational image of reality, a specific place or landscape. It is called Shan Xiao, the three characters standing for respectively mountain, water, and painting. It is a metaphorical or spiritual vision attached to a landscape, and the depiction and creation of realistic space is not one of its aims. So unlike the Western painting tradition, which under the strong influence of science emphasized proportion, perspective and realistic depiction of form, the Chinese artists never felt compelled to restrict themselves to this limited view. Eastern art has a concept of using no or multiple vanishing points. Because a painting is not a window, there is no need to imitate the mechanics of vision and view a scene from only one spot. The Chinese artist inspects the world from unrestricted, shifting points of view. This is also known as the shifting perspective method called Sandian Tushi, and is essentially different from the strict and realistic Western single perspective. In addition, the Chinese landscape painting is usually composed through a second system of perspective that includes multiple vanishing points called Saneiho, the three distances, which are high distance, deep distance, and level distance. This was first established by the painter Guo Xi in his famous book Sublime Notes by Forests and Rivers. An artist can combine two or three expressions of distance in a single landscape. The composition of a hanging scroll usually places the foreground at the bottom of the scroll with the middle and far distances moving upward toward the top of the scroll. As the Dutch author Jan Crick describes in his book The Corridor of Space, the shifting perspective called Sandiantushi, which translates as equal angle see-through, became familiar in the West as a sonometry. It was used in the classic vertical hanging scrolls and the horizontal hand scrolls. Chinese hand scrolls were up to 10 meters in length and are based on a pictorial synthesis of space and time. Rather than having a subject, the scroll is based on a scenario. It unrolls in time and space from right to left at the speed you wish to go. Thus the hand scroll is referred to as the first motion picture. The artists of the traditional Chinese landscape painting do not show us a moment in time, but rather a time span. Once the Russian avant-garde filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein was inspired by the commonality between Chinese hand scrolls and the medium film in the development of his theory of film montage. He had also drawn on traditional scroll paintings that fused in his mind a combined image of close-ups and composition in depth through the use of Saneho, which is the concept of multi-perspective. According to Crick, sonometry was introduced to Europe in the 17th century by Jesuits returning from China and became the root for isometrical perspective, which is like linear perspective, a graphical method to project three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional picture plane, and is a standard feature in CAD systems and most multimedia authoring programs. Shifting perspective can, of course, also be found in traditional 2D animation, film, and illustration. But also concepts of multi-perspective can be found today in 3D visualization. Software for 3D visualization allows the user to create multiple cameras and viewpoints. Shifting perspective, looking at the scene from different angles and distances, can be easily alternated during the process of constructing a virtual space and is an important requirement in software design. Most 3D software solutions offer a split-screen mode where 4 different perspectives can be monitored simultaneously. During the process of construction, the Western user is free, like the Chinese artist, to move in space and in his imagination of a landscape. But when it comes to the moment of finally rendering an image or a sequence as a final output, there is suddenly only one camera perspective possible at one time. One computer-generated image can only contain one perspective. The constraints of the software are limited to the laws of linear perspective and the Cartesian grid. The integration of different viewpoints in one image can often only be achieved in a later process, for example, with a compositing tool where different images and perspectives can be put together as a collage through the layering of separate image information. Here it is obvious that 3D software is designed towards creating artifacts corresponding with real space rather than imaginative space, serving the Western preoccupation. Now we have a look how Chinese aesthetics are applied in the digital video scroll that you can see here. The video painting Shanxiu is a combination of a vertical and horizontal scroll. It is presented on a large high-resolution flat-screen monitor, wall-mounted in vertical position as a video painting. The vertical hanging scroll is given through the format of the vertical mounted monitor and gives space to apply the concept of Saneho, combining different perspectives within one image. The horizontal scroll of the video unrolls in time and space, but only in the moment of projection, and is composed and animated from right to left in analogy to the East Asian principle. The video presents a permanent virtual camera movement, gliding through an indefinite landscape. A playful interaction takes place between composition and movement in both directions, expanding and combining the possibilities of the two different traditional scroll formats, applying the two concepts of Chinese perspective Saneho, the multiple viewpoints, and Sandiantushi, the shifting perspective, simultaneously. For further information, contact the author of this presentation, or refer to the published article in the Journal of Technology, Knowledge and Society. Thank you for your attention.